Spyderco, Gayle Bradley. This is one of my favorites. Actually, this is the knife and the steel that got me into some of the harder use steels out here. It's obviously named, you can read the blurb on Spyderco's site, after Gayle Bradley, who popularized it for its use in blade sports, blah blah blah. For that, arguably it's the best steel in existence in terms of cutting performance. I mean, in the same way you could argue that a Formula 1 car is the best car in existence. Similar sort of thing. It displays, of the carbide formers, excuse me, I have tough glide schmutz on here. Of the carbide formers, it's certainly one of the higher performance ones. It doesn't have the wear resistance of something like S90V or M390, so you're not going to see it at the very top of certain people's wear resistance tests. But in actual practical use, I've found it to hold an edge much longer, just because unlike some of those steels, it's not as prone to degrading from slight chipping when you go through materials. This one's reasonably sharp at the moment, actually. And so it's a good knife overall. There was some controversy surrounding the carbon fiber on this blade, and that was down to Spyderco advertising this as being a carbon fiber handle scale. And so there was some thread that was started, but I guess it's been brought up a bunch of different times, but the thread where it really exploded was somebody said it was they'd heard it was not actually carbon fiber, and then a bunch of Spyderco, fanatics, aficionados, whatever you like to call them, jumped on and said, no, of course it's carbon fiber, Spyderco would never do that, why would you think it's not solid carbon fiber, how dare you accuse them of that, and back and forth, until finally Sal showed up and said, well, it's actually, he said what everybody else who owned the knife and who'd looked at it said, which is that it's a single layer of carbon cloth over a fiberglass composite. Some people would call it G10. I believe G10 is an actual specification, not just any fiberglass composite, so this may not actually be technically G10, but shades of gray. So that was that, and Spyderco was insistent that nobody had been misled. I don't know, I maintain that the very fact that Spyderco fans showed up and argued that, no, Spyderco would never do that to you, is pretty incontrovertible evidence that whether it was intentional or not, some people were, in fact, misled. I guess it doesn't really matter. Spyderco did, after some amount of flaming, go in and change their website blurbs and their magazine, their release, their catalog, that's the word I'm looking for. I apologize. And so that should be all sorted out now. It is, aesthetically, it's fine. It's got a nice carbon fibery texture, which I think is a very positive thing. There were some issues certain people saw where if you drop this on its edge as opposed to normal G10 or carbon fiber, whatever, which would just chip, this would form a fault along the bond between the carbon fiber and the fiberglass underneath, because presumably this is laminated on separately, which is why it comes up with that carbon fiber texture instead of coming out flat. It's because it was laminated onto an existing hardened composite, and as always in composites, the resin line is the weakest link. But it's not really a source of concern. I haven't babied this knife, although I've not really beaten on it either. And it's got no issue, and all composites that use as handles can, if you drop them hard enough, can chip. I guess my point is that some people, after Spyderco came out and said, well, it's not solid carbon fiber, but what's it matter? I guess my response is sort of, 2 points. Truth matters for truth's sake, and it is not actually exactly the same. Certainly, they advertise certain models as saying, has the strength and lightweight of carbon fiber, blah, 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 and clearly that's not the case. It doesn't have the strength or the lightweight of carbon fiber, although both, in terms of non-structural handle scales, are about equivalent. So, again, some people thought it was a big deal, other people thought it wasn't. My biggest pet peeve in the whole thing was, some people's I guess, insistence that, well, it doesn't matter, why would you dare care and keep bringing this up, or something like that. You know, truth, I guess, truth matters, I guess I would say. But I don't want to make this about that. So, on the whole, the knife, the fit and finish is really quite excellent. It's extremely smooth. It's got a great feel. Really one of the, I think it's the smoothest non-bushing pivot Spyderco I've handled. And the Tai Chug models broadly are actually extremely smooth like this. The Volaton I have is quite nice as well, and I've handled Navahas, which at least seemed smooth if you could tolerate their chirping device. If you can see here, the steel actually that makes up the handle, it's much more of a frame than a liner, I would say. It makes up the frame. It does actually protrude ever so slightly at the edge. And this, it fits beautifully flush here with the tang of the blade, the handle frame. And so then coming in here you get, again, you know, you could argue whether it's a liner lock or a frame lock. You can see it's got earlier lockup than most liner locks. So I guess I still call it a frame lock, and I call these, you know, aesthetic scales. It's certainly not the sort of knife like a Dodo or something like that, where it has some steel spines and it really has a backbone of composite. This does not. This is one of the earlier ones, I believe, which is minorly skeletonized. The earliest ones had no skeletonization. Later ones were much more skeletonized. Again, good polish on edges all around. Some people complain that it's difficult to disengage this frame lock. As a flicker, what I will say, flicker meaning somebody who obsessively does this for hours, I'll say that this does require a certain amount of force to engage, or disengage rather, and it is a slightly sharp edge, and after a certain amount of time doing that back and forth, it will make the tip of your thumb slightly sore. That said, it seems to me that it was more designed for somebody who, instead of disengaging it with the tip of your thumb like so, you actually use the base of your thumb like that. And when you do that, you'll find it's much more comfortable to do over time. It could have made it easier to access. I'm not sure it would have been necessary. If you're the type of person who argues that gripping a frame lock makes it stronger, which I'm not sure I condone, this does give you a little bit of that lip there that you can grip that with. And I've seen people modify with a rotary tool or the like, come in here and cut this deeper, or come over here and cut some of this off so that they're gripping the frame lock more. I don't really find it necessary, but different strokes, I guess. The steel, CPM M4, I think I briefly touched on it being sort of the best, you know, the best steel in the world if you view something like a Formula 1 car as being the best car in the world. Good performance. I like it. It's a great all-rounder. It can corrode, but it's not as rust-prone as a lot of the sort of 1095s and such of the world, which is good. Actually, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but it has a slight, I guess I would call it a slight sort of amberish tinge to it as compared to the steel frame here, which, I don't know, somebody may claim that that's patina forming. I would disagree, since it came like that, and I've scrubbed it and it's still like that, and it's apparent on all parts of the blade. You may be wondering why I have a soda can and a mule here. So this mule has, granted, seen better days. It belongs to my brother-in-law, and I just sharpened it. And because it's his, I'm going to do a quick demo here on the soda can. So do something like this to S30V, and you'll find, if you run your finger along the edge afterwards, that what you did was created a series of tiny little chips, because the edge doesn't have the stability to really take it. Now, being careful not to cut into the barcode, let's cut into the top part here. And it's not actually hard enough that I need to to do it this way. I just don't want to cut myself, especially not on camera. I bet you're all dying to see it though. Oh, that's doing nice patterns to this etch. So you can see there, it cuts much easier along the side where it's thinner. And you can give it a little twist, no problem. And you come back out, and I know you're not going to be able to see this, but you can run your nail on it, and you can tell that you've cut something, but it's still, you're not going to be able to see shaving either, but it's still shaving sharp, which is good. You do this to another kind of steel, I guess, and you'll find that it's not that level of sharpness. And so that's the thing I like about CPM M4, which ultimately got me out of the world of sort of traditional super steels and into the world of harder use steels, which have lower carbon content and such, because I discovered that contrary to sort of the mantra of, you know, harder, better, faster, stronger, I liked a knife that could tolerate more use sort of peripherally of what you're supposed to do with a knife instead of just simply cut things, because if you're thinking of just sort of normal cutting tasks, you can do it with a very small blade, and it's not terribly difficult or terribly strenuous. But when you think of everything else, what do you want a large blade for? Well, you want it to chop something, or, you know, cut something heavy. Or what if, you know, you need to cut through a copper conductor or something like that? You know, could you use a stick and baton it through that or something like that? So that's how I got into this steel. I sort of had been going further and further into super steel land up until I got this knife and discovered that magically, even though it was supposed to be not as good as something like S90V, CTS 20CP, M390, Rex 121, I mean, go down the list, it in fact performs better. Now, that's important side note, now that I mentioned Rex 121. Rex 121, if you do simply a vertical cut through a can like this, you will not actually dull it. And in fact, you can take a Rex 121 knife and go against even a steel piece of something and go like that, and find that it's still completely sharp. That steel's, I don't know if you'd call it problem or thing, it's so high hardness, it's over 50% carbide, it doesn't actually sharpen up like a lot of these higher carbide volumes where you get this burn down of the initial sharpness very quickly. And that's, my guess, is just because on the microscopic level, the carbides are so large and there's so much less ability for tear out of the steel around the carbides that that you have an edge that it is much more robust. You do have a bit of difficulty sharpening it to its very high levels of sharpness. You really do want diamonds to do Rex 121, but at least in my experience you do. But its real problem is lateral edge stability. So, you know, you can take a blade like this and just go like that, no problem, right? And so you're applying a little lateral force, no biggie really, but you do something like that to Rex 121 and you know, apply some force. I guess I should demo this with actual force on it, like that. I'm sure you have no force gauge to judge this, but I'm applying some force. Do something like that to Rex 121 and you'll hear a little pop and you'll notice you just lost a bit of the edge, whereas this, no problem whatsoever. I mean, you can feel just barely where that happened with the blade. And so that's that sort of thing. It's going in the opposite direction. This tolerates it better than you'll get something like S30V to tolerate it, and so on and so forth. But overall, it's a good knife. I say it's definitely worth a buy. Certainly, if you're the type of person who really likes high levels of fit and finish on their knives, this is great. It has a slightly more robust tip than Spydercos are usually known for, which is also nice. And it's a great slicer, despite its hollow grind. It really performs well, and I'd recommend it. I should have pulled out calipers and measured thickness behind the edge. I will say that down here the thickness behind the edge is much lower than up up here where it's much thicker, and that's sort of reflected in bevel width. And it's a good knife. One other concern I should mention quickly is some people have said that you have issues accessing the spider hole here. I don't find this to be the case, but only if it's just bare hands. If you are wearing gloves or something like that, you'll find you have a bit of a tendency to go over it. And it also restricts your ability to do something like, you know, the middle finger flick, which I can still do, apparently. But in an earlier take of this video, I cocked that up and missed it. And that will happen. It's not as positive a use of the spider hole as you'll find on other Spydercos. But, you know, it's somebody else's take on the whole thing. And it was good. Useless other features you know about. Clip is tip up, tip down, right or left hand carry. Hardware is nicely flush, all except for this screw, which you can feel protrudes ever so slightly. Non-issue, really. And this carbon fiber texture is much easier on the corners of your pockets than the Peel Ply G10 you're probably much more used to. But yep. Thanks for watching.